Welcome to a special episode of the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. I'm half of your host, Perry Constantine, and the other half, if you've listened to the last special episode, is unfortunately no longer with us. Derrick Ferguson passed away on April 4th, 2021. Like I mentioned, if you listen to the last special, I'm working on trying to get people together to come and come on the show and talk about Derrick. And we were trying to see if we can schedule like a roundtable thing, but there's one person in particular that I think it's better if, and we both kind of thought it'd be better if we kind of sit down and just talk, just the two of us, because like me, this is a guy who had hosted a podcast with Derrick for very long. And that is a guy I've also known for many years, and that's Thomas Deja, who he and Derrick hosted the Better in the Dark podcast. So this is the first time we're doing a podcast like our two podcasts are kind of merging together. So I guess we could call this Superhero Cinephiles Are Better in the Dark. So Tom, how you doing today?
Well, as I was saying, as well as can be expected. I think, I think it took a lot of people by surprise, and I've been kind of numb for a couple of days because this man stood by me at my worst.
Yeah. I've definitely been in those situations as well, and that was one of the things that even though you had a different experience because you and Derrick actually knew each other in person. You lived
yes. I mean,
together. Yeah.
We lived only about 2-3 miles away from each other.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And we found that out by accident, obvious. But yeah, no, he was one of my closest friends.
Well, that's a good place to start. Is how did you and Derrick first meet? How did you discover by accident that you live so close together?
Not surprisingly, we met, quote unquote, due to the fact that I dropped a film reference in one of my fan fictions. In Bill Katepi, our good mutual friend down in New Orleans, started a fanfic site called DC Year One.
Mm-hmm.
That was based on a role-playing game that he play-by-email role-playing game that he had devised. That led us to, well, why not we also do Marvel Year One? And I did. I won Daredevil because Daredevil has always been one of my favorite characters.
Mm-hmm.
And in one episode, I made a reference to Derrick Flint.
Mm.
And Derrick sends me an email saying, I had to say, anybody who knows who Derrick Flint is these days. And we started corresponding, and we learned we were in the same city, and that led to us, to our surprise, realizing how close together we were.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a member of the Horror Writers Association of America, and they were doing a special screening for HWA members in New York for Hellboy.
Oh, okay.
And by this time we've been talking on the phone,
mm-hmm.
and these phone conversations were epic.
As they
I
tend
think
to be
that
with
Patricia
Derrick,
would basically tell Derrick, get the hell off the phone and come to bed.
That sounds familiar.
So I said, hey, yeah. And so I said, do you want to come and see Hellboy? And he said, yeah, I do. So he came as my guest, met F. Paul Wilson, did not know F. Paul Wilson was a major influence on him.
Oh, okay.
So because he was talking about, and I'm like, I'm turning around, and there's F. Paul, and I'm like, this is F. Paul Wilson, and he's like, that's F. Paul Wilson. and it was one of the few times I saw him starstruck.
Mm-hmm.
But and we saw the Hellboy film for the first time. That was the first film we ever saw together. Shortly after that, we went and did it again for a film called Identity.
Yeah, I remember that
which
movie.
I think he had a little bit more of a high opinion of than I did.
Yeah, that was something that him and I we made reference to it several times on the show as a movie that we both enjoyed.
And around this time, a friend of mine had started an internet radio station. You guys all remember internet radio?
Mm-hmm.
And it was
very vaguely, yeah.
Yeah, very vaguely, and it was supposed to be sci-fi based. And he came to me and said, "Could you do some programming for it?" Mm-hmm. And one of the ideas I had was an audio drama, which I was working on with David Ellis. Mm-hmm. And I said, the other thing is, I'd love to do a movie, like a show about movies, and I'd like to bring my friend Derrick in.
And that was the start of Better in the Dark then.
Started the Better in the Dark, exactly. Mm-hmm. And so on Super Bowl Sunday 2007, mm-hmm. we recorded, before going up to watch the football, the first 3 episodes of what we call Better in the Dark, which is a reference that I took from Pet Shop Boys' song, We All Feel Better in the Dark, mm-hmm. which I thought was a good metaphor for what the movie-going experience is like. Because the thing about going to the movies is it's one of the few places where you can sit down with total strangers having the same experience.
Right.
Communally. And mm-hmm. some of my best favorite experiences are when I was in a movie. I like to cite usually Saw. The first time mm-hmm. I saw Saw, and the big reveal at the end, and everybody in the theater together just went, "Oh!" Mm-hmm. And it's that communality where you don't know who you're with or who you're from. You're for that moment united.
Right. Yeah.
So, but anyway, so we did these first 3 episodes, and I edited them and I sent them to Michael Fallu, and Michael didn't put them out. So we figured, what the hell? We might as well put them out on this thing called the intranet. Mm-hmm. In 2007, and people liked it, and we liked getting together, and because that was the thing about Better in the Dark. It was just the 2 of us hanging out for the whole day.
Right.
I would show up around 11 o'clock, and we'd record some episodes, and then we'd have lunch, and we would just hang out for the whole day, and just and I think that's the strength of any great podcast, is the sense that it's not just 2 people conducting business. It's 2 people having a conversation, and you set up a chair for them.
Yeah. And I think Derrick especially made that a much more mm-hmm. Personal experience, just because he had that kind of personality where even if you didn't know him very well, you felt mm-hmm. like you knew him very well. Like he just had that kind of personality where he made you feel like you'd known each other for years. I remember we were guests on the Pop Culture DNA podcast fairly recently. This was just a few months ago. And we were talking about, and the 2 women who run that show, we didn't know them at all. We had no prior connection to mm-hmm. us. They had just discovered our podcast, and they just sent me an email, and they said, "Hey, we're doing a series on Black Panther. We listened to your episode. Mm-hmm. We really liked it. We were wondering if you guys would like to come on." And we came on, and within like not even 5 minutes, Derrick was talking to these women as if he had known them for years.
Derrick was a showman.
Yeah.
Derrick would not admit to being a showman, but Derrick was a showman. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the reason why I think he was successful in promoting his own work and in promoting the works of others. Mm-hmm. And as such, he has that kind of big personality that people gravitate towards.
Yeah.
And I learned much, much later that he agreed to do better in the dark. He didn't have any interest in being on the radio at first, but he did it because he knew I needed something to focus on during this time, because I was, for those of you who don't know me, I've suffered all my life with severe bipolar disorder and something that they call explosive mood disorder, which means that anything that you would experience at 100%, I would experience at 200%.
Right.
And that made life difficult.
Yeah, understandably so.
So we would do it basically we used to be like once a month, once every 2 months. I would get on the train and later onto my bike, Emma, and we would record a couple of episodes and hang out for the day, and then I would go home.
Yeah, for us, it was we were just doing it week to week through originally through Skype, and then after the pandemic hit and I really discovered Zoom for the first time, then we found out that Zoom actually lets you record on 2 tracks at the same time, which saved me a lot of trouble. We started doing it through Zoom. But what were so when you first met, because I know you said you guys went to the Hellboy movie premiere, and that was in 2004. So how long when was the first time you had actually met? When did you start corresponding about?
Was I think about 2001, 2002. It was fairly early on. So we had corresponded, and then we started the phone calls. Like I said, those epic phone calls that would start maybe at 9 o'clock, and maybe if we were lucky, end around midnight, where it was just me and him talking about movies and the like such, because that was something we did. We had a great bond on, obviously, and that it became. In fact, I think that was the first time I'd ever been invited over to his house. Was that Super Bowl Sunday. And he sometimes, because we didn't want it to end, he would just drive me home because it wasn't that far away, so we could continue talking. That was why I went back briefly to fan fiction in like 2012, 2013, when I did those West Coast Avengers for Altered Views, because he was like, I'm doing the Avengers, and the guy's doing the West Coast Avengers, and I think you would be kind of cool. And we started riffing, and the next thing you know, I wrote, like 15, and I wrote them in a rather quick succession too. That was the crazy thing. But anyway, but the thing was, and Derrick was kind of even though I would say, we could do this remotely, and like, no, I think this is part of our charm, is us doing it together.
Yeah. So let me ask you about that, because you and Derrick had worked on a few different things, like fanfic wise and that kind of thing. What was your experience working with him? What was that like?
I had no problems at all. Because the thing was, we're two creative minds. So we're constantly bouncing ideas off of each other. And there is, in fact, somewhere in this mess of an archive that I keep, there are plans that Derrick and I made for a couple of crossover stories with our original characters. Particularly, there is one with Diamondback and Elsa Dawn from that long unfinished novel Obsidian Revolver.
Was it Onyx Revolver?
Onyx Revolver.
I remember making a logo for that way back in the day. Yeah,
Onyx Revolvers, yes. So we had hammered out an idea for a Diamondback Elsa Dawn story that was going to end with the two of them over a coffin, guns drawn.
That would have been nice to see.
Yeah, and we also had plans on, because before I went through the last of my really dark phases, Derrick and I talked about a book. One of the fourth book in the Shadow Legion series was going to be a collection of novellas, and I'd have each of the characters team up with a different character from another writer. And so we have been talking about Dylan and the Nightbreaker as his contribution. So we were but that's the thing. We were always talking about different projects, different things we wanted to do. We wanted to do a live Better in the Dark. We wanted to find, at one point, we were talking about finding a pub or some similar venue that we could rent out and just show a movie and sit and talk and just have a good time with the audience. We were constantly talking about other things. He always had ideas. I always had ideas. I will say that it took us a while. I'm sure your show did the same thing. It took but I think the one that I like to think is the one that gelled what Better in the Dark was going to be was when we did the Halloween retrospective, which I think was episode 8. And once we got that together, I think then we knew, okay, this is our rhythms, this is our habit. And we went through many things during those 7 years. And the one thing we knew is that any wild idea, heck, remember we had musical segments.
That's right, I remember that. Yeah.
When Kaylin Connolly, who did our theme song, and I talked on Friday after this was the news started reaching everybody. One of the first things I remembered was an episode where we talked about Dino De Laurentiis. And this conversation, he had this anecdote about how, I was an extra in that movie, King Kong. And he was describing about how, we were all at the World Trade Center and they brought out this giant foam Kong. And I started laughing. I said, that sounds like a sex act. And the next thing you know, we're doing this rap song of giant foam Kong for you, baby. I got a giant foam Kong for you.
That's right. I do remember you guys doing those little musical things on the air. Those were really nice.
And most of them were not planned.
Right. Yeah.
Most of them were not planned. Because the thing was, we would another favorite episode that I remember is probably one of my favorite episodes was the last Christmas episode we did, which was supposedly part of our long delayed Summer of Speed. And we were looking at existential car movies. We were looking at Two-Lane Blacktop, which is amazing. And Vanishing Point and other films from that era. And for some reason, we got off on this debate about Baby It's Cold Outside.
Oh, yeah.
And I started talking about my favorite Christmas song, which is the Pogues' Christmas Fairy Tale of New York. And it was just once again doing this, or like the time that he just out of nowhere asked me which companion would I want to travel with if I was the Doctor. And I went on this reasoned. I'm like, well, I could do this, or I could do that, or I could do, and ended with, or I could just choose Karen Gillan and bang her all day.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I'm proud of you because I thought you were going to go right to that. So, but that's the thing, is that even though we didn't have the script,
Mm-hmm.
but I used to have like an info sheet I would print out the first like year,
Mm-hmm.
but those were useless. So, but we always had an idea of what we were going to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But it always ended up the last 20 minutes or so, we would go riffing on something else.
That was you couldn't have a script with Derrick and do a podcast. It's just
no.
that was something
I think that. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that was something I knew going into it, because Derrick and I had done a few shows in the past. He had been a guest on some other. When I did the Exploding Typewriter Pulp podcast,
right.
He had come on a few episodes of that, and just knowing from our conversations and knowing from when he came on those shows, I knew that. And he had also been on Japan on Film at that point as well,
right.
And so I knew going in that there's no script here. It's just you're just gonna sit down with Derrick and you're just gonna let him go.
Mm-hmm.
And
no. I mean, once again, I think that was one of the reasons why Better in the Dark was as successful as it was.
Yeah.
That it was a spontaneous conversation. Now, granted, it was a conversation where usually we sat down and said, okay, we're going to talk about. There is still one episode of Better in the Dark, and I've not been able to get it out of the Dalmatian,
mm-hmm.
which was the jump drive that we used at the end of the run. I've not been able to get it out of the Dalmatian, which is we did, and it was a great episode. We did an episode covering all 7 of the Smokey and the Bandit films.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, it's like, okay, we're going to talk about the Smokey and the Bandit films, but then next thing you know, we're going to talk about the non-zombie George Romero films, and the next thing you know, we're riffing on Jason Statham.
Yeah. There was one episode we did, I can't remember. I'm trying to think of the exact one, where we had, I think I even put in the episode description, like in between all these other digressions, we find some time to talk about this movie. I think it might have been the Nick Fury episode.
A film that I remember him really liking and defending.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He was adamant that we were going to be doing about, one of the things we did, we had a nice arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
When we did the show is, we decided right from the start that, we'd alternate movie picks. So like I'd pick something for the episode, then he'd pick something. So we had that back and forth going, which really worked well for us, because he had a bunch of these, really obscure superhero movies that he knew about. Well, he knew about obscure movies in general, but he also knew about, and so like he brought in like one of his first picks was, after he got through Batman, like the pick after that was Swamp Thing, and then he chose the original Doctor Strange movie, and then Nick Fury. And the Nick Fury episode, I just looked up the description. Between digressions about politics and comics, the Watchmen TV series, Crisis, and a whole bunch of other tangents, we kind of talk about our main movie.
Yeah, it's that was the thing. Is usually it would take us about 15 minutes to actually get to the meat of the episode.
Yeah.
And we usually drifted off.
Yeah.
Of it towards the end of it, which is why, like I said, in the last 2 years, we were producing 2-hour to 2.5-hour episodes of what was supposed to be a 45-minute show.
Yeah.
Back in 2007. And usually it would come, the conversation, the first 15 minutes was something that was spurred on by what was going on right that moment.
Yes.
I was talking to my therapist this morning about one episode where the day that I had come over to record, Stieg Larsson's estate had announced that his widow or his girlfriend or somebody had found an unfinished Elizabeth Salander novel, and they were gonna have it completed and published, and that went on to a long a discussion about what we would want done,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm almost afraid to listen to at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's like the time we started talking about the Republican, that he says, have you seen this new comedy show? It's really crazy. They've got these guys, it's called the Republican Debates.
Oh, I remember that thing.
Yes. So,
yeah, we did a lot of that. I remember, like, we had a bunch of tangents, especially during the past election. Like, we had a bunch of tangents about the Democratic debates, about all sorts of different things. And we had a running joke that because whenever we had taken like a week or two off, some crazy crisis happened. And it's like, I'd come back, and I told him the last time was after the insurrection. And we had been off. We had been off the air for like 2 weeks because scheduling issues. There was also confusion because my daughter had been born during that time too, and so he just assumed that I wouldn't be available to record. And so then I sent him an email. I'm like, hey, where are you? And he's like, oh, I just assumed, your daughter was born, you wouldn't be recording. I'm like, no, she's still at the hospital. Right. I can't even go over there yet because of COVID. So.
Right.
But so then when we finally got together, and I opened the episode, and I told him, like, I've got a theory that our podcast is the glue holding the universe in order, because every time we take a week off, something insane happens.
Oh, Lord.
So I don't know what's going to happen now.
I don't know, but I know. Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to keep it positive. That's the important thing, I think, is I'm one of these people that believes if you live a life that you wanted to live, and he did. He lived the life he wanted to live.
Yeah.
We should focus on celebrating his life, not obsessing over the fact that he died.
Yeah. And one of the things too is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Which is one of the reasons why I've been encouraging people to do positive things. It's like because you remember that list. I don't know if I'm sure you saw that list on, I think it was Saturday that I posted.
I don't think I did.
On Facebook. Okay, well, I did it. I said, because that was a question that I got from a lot of people, and I was like, at the moment, I was still kind of numb, going like, and I said, look, here, buy a copy of his book and give it to somebody you think will like it. And if you don't know anybody like that, donate it to your local library. Go on Amazon and leave reviews for newer authors, because that was a thing that he was always big on, was encouraging people to be creative.
Yeah, definitely.
And
well, I mean, it was I mentioned this in the last episode, but it was because of him that I ended up writing my first novel, because he was the first person who said to me, he's like, you should write a novel. And at first I'm like, no. And he's like, yeah. And so then I had a few aborted attempts. Then finally I did. And now, 30 books later, and it's all due to that one conversation where he says, I'm waiting for you to write a novel. Oh
yeah. It was because I had been writing original fiction in the 90s. I wrote about 24 horror short stories.
You also wrote something for those old Marvel compilation books.
Oh gosh, yes, I'm looking at them right now. Yes, I did stories for three of the Byron Price Marvel anthologies.
They were Ultimate before the actual Ultimate comics.
Yes. There was Ultimate. Which ones did I do? I did Ultimate Hulk. I did X-Men Legends, which features one of the weirdest covers I've ever seen. I don't know what that painter was thinking of, but it wasn't the X-Men. and 5 decades of the X-Men. So I had some experience, but then I had a traumatic experience around 2000 that made writing horror not fun. So I did nothing but write fan fiction for a while, and Derrick was always big on trying to get me back into doing original stuff. And it was him who introduced me to Russ Anderson. In fact, that was another one of our earliest meetups. He said, my publisher is coming in to do a show here in Brooklyn. You want to come? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay. And it was because of Russ's How the West Was Weird, and he said, you should write something for this. And yeah. I wrote the first Don Quavo story. Mm-hmm. And he continued trying to encourage me, and to the point where the Shadow Legion is partially his responsibility as well.
Yeah,
that was original. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead. You finish your thought.
Because that was originally a fan fiction mm-hmm. proposal, and I was looking at it, and I sent it to Derrick, and I sent it to Duran Fortier, and I sent it to a couple of other people, and I said, am I crazy, or should this be, I should just make this original? Mm-hmm. And Derrick, within 20 minutes, said, hell yeah. Get to work, dummy.
Yeah, I had a situation like that as well. And mm-hmm. this was actually, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is a fan fiction series that you brought me in on. You asked me to do Wolverine for, I think it was Altered Visions or one of those other sites around there.
Right.
And so I'd written this series, and it was really, brutal. And Eric was the one who said to me, he's like, why'd you do this as fan fiction? This should be something original. And then I mentioned that I did end up repackaging it as an original novel. Mm-hmm. And he was also instrumental in a lot of other stuff I did. When I created my Elisa Hill character, she was really very different. And, just mm-hmm. workshopping her with Derrick, and he mm-hmm. gave me an idea that has been so crucial to that character is, I had originally envisioned her as you using a samurai sword, a katana, and he's like, everybody uses a katana. He's like, why are you going to do he's like, you know what you should do? Have her use ancient weaponry that nobody used. I'm like, that's a good idea. And that became one of the character's trademarks. And that was because of, mm-hmm. and another one is one of the characters in it, supernatural Japanese changeling. And he had said, he's like, you know what? I picture this girl as just being too cool. And she's she's dressed in a pinstripe suit. She's always wearing a fedora. That's how that's become mm-hmm. the character's signature look, was because Derrick gave me that piece of advice.
Right. Well, like all creatives whose path I've crossed, mm-hmm. he could not be creative.
Right.
And when he talked with me frequently, we would go off on these world building tangents. There are worlds that we have created that nobody's ever seen.
Yeah.
Because we were just hanging out and going oh, you know what would be cool if this happened? And then we would just start riffing. But that's why I suggested what has become the Folded Earth Project. Mm-hmm. Because, and I hope he does. He's probably going to roll his eyes when I say this, but I think of him, and I think of Derrick, and I think of Jack Kirby.
Yeah, yes.
In that Jack Kirby was all about go out and build your own wonder.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of these quote unquote tributes to Jack Kirby, where they revive the New Gods for the 15th time, mm-hmm. or they gosh, for goodness sakes, we got the Eternals coming mm-hmm. on the screens. But I'm sure that if we were able to channel Jack Kirby, I think this is something that Mark Evaner first said, and it's something I agree with. If you asked Jack Kirby what you could do in tribute to him, he would say, make your own stuff.
I'm working on the side. I'm doing some work with this startup comic publisher, and that was how they started up. Was he said that we're in this artist group, and they all wanted to do some Jack Kirby tribute, and they all were throwing around, drawings of like his characters, and then he finally just said, he's like, hey, if we really want to honor Jack Kirby, we should just create our own characters. And that's how this thing started up that we're doing. And yeah, Derrick was very much the same. I remember one time it was a few years ago, I asked him, I'm like, I had started doing some research about the Old West and the Chinese diaspora and all that kind of stuff. And I had asked him, because I knew he was a huge Western guy. Like
right.
he he loved Westerns like baby loved his rattle, as something Derrick would have said. And
yes. And one of the things is that you don't have to have the West to be a Western.
Right. Yeah. And he had said to, and I had asked him, like, I'm like, do you know if there's ever been like, a Chinese Old West gunslinger? And he's like, no, but that sounds like a really good idea. You should do it. And then that led to my my story for Pro Se's Asian Pulp, where I introduced the Hatchet Man character Shun Han, which Derrick and I had actually begun. We'd signed a contract. We had begun working on it. We were going to do a series of novels based on that character, and he had actually one of our last conversations was he asked me to resend him the information so he could get work on starting to plot out the first book. And so yeah, we had actually been hoping to get started on that like around now. And so yeah, that
well yeah.
But I mean, that's something I don't know if I want to do, just because one of the reasons I went to Derrick was because he's so much more knowledgeable about the Western genre and stuff like that than I am. So I don't know if that project would ever see the light of day without him, just because of how much I wanted his input on that. But we're not ready to announce anything yet, but we are working on some stuff that he would have liked, I think.
Yeah, but it's that's the thing though, is if you want to honor him, create.
Yes. Yeah.
You put something new in the world that somebody else can look at, and we get that sense of wonder from.
Yeah. I don't think there's one concept I've had that Derrick didn't have eyes on in some form in the past. In any of my original stuff, I don't think there's anything that Derrick didn't have eyes on at one point before it was published.
Yeah. There are lots of characters that he and I talked about that have never seen light of day. The infamous Tao Jones, I still have half a book of, which was going to be my, because of course Derrick and I had a great love of Peter O'Donnell's Modesty Blaze books, and Tao Jones was my way to kind of pay tribute to O'Donnell. And she was supposed to be part of Sovereign City with Fortune McCall.
Oh, okay.
And in fact, I think that we actually wrote a scene, like a brief crossover scene for one of the books. But yeah, no, it was always, we would just sit there and we'd come up with ideas, and it would strike me like thunder. Oh, that's what we should do. I tried to get him, when my life took this rather insane change last year. I did try to bring him in on what is now ATW, because one of the first things was we got to do Dylan audio. Yeah. Which is something that he and I had talked about. And in fact, I recorded a couple of chapters of Dylan in the voice of Odin, with the idea that he was going to release them every month on his audio, on his Patreon. And that because I had the attention span of a gnat, kind of didn't go anywhere. But I remember reaching out to him and saying, I don't believe I'm doing this, but I've got an audio radio drama troupe now, and I want to bring Dylan to other people. And he goes, Tom, I think you've got enough on your plate right now. you know, you got enough on your plate with Strangers in Paradise with the other stuff. Let's not start that. And I'm like, okay, sure enough. But I said to him, I'm going to keep trying. Well,
that was we had been talking about, because I had in the past 2 or 3 years or so, I've started to take art classes and starting to work on my own art skills. And one of my goals, one of the things I really wanted to do, one of the things that I had envisioned doing is, and I told him this, and you know, and that I wanted to do a Dylan comic book with him, and because we had worked long time ago, we had I had adapted one of his Dylan stories into comic script, because Derrick hated writing comic scripts. He hated, he just did not understand how to put them together. And so like whenever he had a Dylan comic story, what he would do is he would write out it as a short story, and then he'd send it to someone else to write the script. Like Russ did a few scripts, I believe, for a lot of the like I think all the ones that Airship 27 has published, all the Dylan comic stories were scripted by Russ, I believe. And at one point, I was trying to get a comic anthology together that unfortunately never really saw the light of day. The only 3 stories got completed from that. Airship 27 published, I think, only 2 of them. One of them was a story I did with Domino Lady. Another one was one Hunter Lambright did with the Purple Scar. But none of these other stories had ever really gotten completed. But one of the ones that came in was Derrick had sent me, I believe it was a chapter from Pirates of Zanira or Legend of the Golden Bell, or one of those, or one of those that, and he had sent me the story, and I had worked and I had translated into script form, and I had just had such a ball doing that, and it was always something I'd wanted to do more of. And
that was the great thing about Derrick's writing, is you got the sense, like with the Dylan novels, you got the sense that you were hearing about 3 things in a Dylan novel. But for everything that you heard about, there were 5 or 6 things that happened that just didn't come up.
Yes, yeah. Well, he had so many. I mean, the cool thing about Derrick, and I think this is one of the reasons why whenever we did podcasts with him, he'd always go on tangent, is his mind never stopped, right? He was just always, his mind was, he could stay focused on something, but he was always had something else going on the side. And so in the Dylan stories, you see that where he brings in all these little references to stuff that, like other stories, other adventures, stuff that he had not even written yet, but it's just the references are there.
I think that one of the projects that he talked about with me during the Better in the Dark phases was, what would happen is he would mention he had these little side characters, and other writers would come up to him and said, I really like that character. And he came up with, he wanted to do an anthology of just those characters written by other people.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
But that's the thing, is that the world, even though he spent a lot of time in Dylan's world, that's barely been touched. Yeah. So, and you always, because that's part of the problem I find with a lot of movies these days, actually, is that you don't get the sense of a world that's lived in. You get a sense of a world that is being manipulated to get you to watch future movies. You know, you can see the marionette strings. Like, okay, yes, here's Lobster Johnson, and he's only in one scene, but he'll be in the next one. But you got the impression that there was this very vibrant world going on constantly.
Yes. Yeah.
And it wasn't that it was that he had to pick and choose which story to tell. It wasn't that he had no other stories. Yeah.
And that was something that Derrick really valued too, was having, because I remember when we were talking about Black Panther, one of the big things for both of us in that movie was just how much the world of Wakanda had felt lived in that movie. And And you can tell from reading the Dylan stuff, or pretty much anything Derrick's written, is that he really valued that feel that there's a world going on out around the camera, around what you're seeing.
And I think that's kind of the difference, the general difference between Marvel movies and DC movies.
Oh, absolutely.
These days,
yeah,
is that I will defend Zack Snyder, but there was always the sense of the DC movies being done by committee.
Yes, absolutely.
Whereas Marvel films were done by committee, but there was always an individual stamp on them. And they felt different and they felt varied. And so the Marvel universe felt more varied and different. And there was all this stuff to explore.
Yeah.
But, of course, if you ask me, Zack Snyder should go into television, believe it or not. I think he should do 10-part series.
Well, I mean, clearly he likes doing the long stuff, so yeah, he could do all the he could do all the promo he wants then.
Yeah, no, but that's the thing. Okay, like Watchmen. Watchmen, when I saw it in the theater, I'm like, okay, that's probably the best we could ever do.
Mm-hmm.
And I even thought the ending was better because I was never comfortable with the giant space squid.
Mm-hmm.
Then I got the director's cut, the 3-hour director's cut, and what I found was not only did it flow better, but it flowed better if I watched it an hour each night over 3 nights, like a miniseries.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's his sensibility. His sensibility is more expansive, and I think that in trying to force it into a 2-hour bottle, he is doing himself a disservice.
Well, if you want to know my thoughts about, because we had talked about the Watchmen movie back in one of the early episodes. I think it was like episode probably 5 or 6 or something along those lines. So yeah, if you want to know my thoughts about that, I definitely have thoughts about Zack Snyder and Watchmen. You can just episode 7. That was.
I know that I am in the small minority amongst my peer group.
Well, because I had one of the interesting things about me with that movie is I had come around on it. Like I had come around from liking it to not liking it. So I had a lot of this because when you guys did that episode of Better in the Dark, when you were talking about Watchmen, and I had re-listened to that episode before we did our own episode on it. So I had gone back and the first time I had listened to that episode and I had seen the movie, I was nodding right along in agreement with you guys. And then since then, after because I hadn't read Watchmen in years, and then I had read it like shortly before we did that episode when the CV show came out, and it was like everybody. I went back and I reread the graphic novel, paying a lot more attention to a lot of things in it, and actually reading the appendices, which I had not done in all the times. And after diving into all that and then rewatching the movie, like when I came to that frame of mind, I'm like, you know what? He's really not getting it. Like it's all the visuals are there, but just like what was being said, he's just really missing the point.
Right. Well, I think that trying to adapt a project like Watchmen is kind of silly to begin with.
Well,
I'm kind of with Alan Moore on this in that because Watchmen is a comic about comics that addresses things, tropes and conventions that the comic industry had pretty much codified. It's trying to translate it into another medium. It's bound to lose stuff.
Right, which is why I think Lindelof made the decision to do the TV show
to tell a story with the same tools as opposed to
exactly, yeah. So and plus like the politics of Watchmen and all that, like it was so rooted in not only comic book tropes and all that, but just so much in war politics, and that stuff kind of gets lost in the movie. But And Lindelof wisely says, like, well, we're not going to do Cold War politics because that doesn't make sense. Moore was commenting on what was happening in the world at the time. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to comment on the world at the time.
Right. But yeah, no, it's.
But anyway, that's I want to get back to well, in true Derrick fashion, we're going on a tangent. Yes, yeah.
Which I'm sure.
Well, looks like we just lost Tom there for a minute. Up now. Okay, so little technical difficulties. This is the first time we're using Zoom with a dial-in, so some unexpected things are bound to happen. Anyway, as we were saying, in true Derrick fashion, we were getting off on a tangent, and then and in true podcast fashion, we had some unexpected technical difficulties.
Yes,
we had that happen.
That was the. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say we had that happen a few times too when we were trying to do a recording or something, and then I remember one time it was just we had just kept losing the connection or something was just and it was just this unbelievable comedy of errors, and eventually we're just like, all right, we're gonna have to stop the episode right here because the internet's just not playing nice with something. Yeah.
So.
But anyway, one of the things I wanted to say, and maybe we'll probably have to close out on this because we're already at an hour and change and whatnot. So, but I wanted to, because one of the things that I really liked about that I really enjoyed about doing the show with Derrick was he always had these what I call them Derrickisms, right? These little like sayings he'd say that just like would come out of nowhere and they'd just be hysterical. And then you just look at him and you're like, how did you even think of that?
My granddaddy used to say, there are three sides to every argument. Your side, my side, and what really happened.
Yeah. One of my favorite one of his was when talking about Watchmen, because when we did our episode about Watchmen, we had talked about, as usual, we'd gotten a tangent, and we had so many tangents about Zack Snyder and the movies. And one of the things that he had said at that time was we were talking about, Zack Snyder would be great if you gave him characters that he was actually suited for. And one of them, I'd mentioned The Question, and Derrick said, The Question. I would push an old lady down in a wheelchair down a flight of stairs to get a Zack Snyder Question movie.
Yes. I remember him saying similar thing. That's why on the Better and the Dark site, we had a glossary. We had a glossary to explain what some of these things meant.
Are there any that jump out in your memory?
Well, like I said, I've already said the three sides to every argument, and of course the way he would go, I say that to say this. Oh God, yeah. But once again, that's the thing: the immediacy, the spontaneity. That is, I think, what made him such a compelling friend and a compelling coworker.
Yeah. I'm actually going through and I'm listening to all the episodes of Superhero Cinephiles and making notes of like points where he had said something that was just either really interesting, really profound, or just really funny, and just making notes of that. And I'd only gotten one episode in so far, but I listened to the Superman episode, and he gave this really good, and it had perfect examples of both those. Like he gave this really good description of what it means to be a hero, and why superheroes were so important to him and all that. But then he had also said that the first time he had shown his wife Patricia Superman the movie, and when Lex Luthor came on the screen, she's like, oh, I get why you like this movie now. And he's like, why is that? And she says, well, because Gene Hackman is Lex Luthor. That's you.
Oh, well, Patricia kept comparing Derrick and me to Denny Crane and I forget what the name of the James Spader character was on The Practice. She kept saying that it's like, I know why you like that show, Derrick, because that's you and that's Tom. So yeah, she used to do that. We used to. Oh, what was once again, this is another episode of Better in the Dark. I remember when, for some reason, we got into a conversation about who would play us.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's all I remember is all these great, the time we got hijacked by Ken McIntyre,
Mm-hmm.
where we were starting the episode and he just took it over.
Oh.
And of course, and I think I would not be the medicated person who has done made all this progress I have made, if not for that episode.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you know which one I'm talking about. The one we would never refer to by name because I had such a breakdown on it. I'm like, as I was editing and listening to it, I'm like, oh, no, this is not what I want people to see me as.
Okay. Yeah. I remember that now. Yeah.
You remember that episode. I remember him telling his theory about Spider-Man in the third episode, where he talked about the great thing about Spider-Man. Spider-Man wears a mask, so he can literally be anybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So no matter who you are, you can project yourself into Spider-Man and identify with Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
So the stuff that we did with Des Reddick,
Mm-hmm.
because we did every Halloween, Des, and we would get together and just, once again, try to talk about 6 horror movies,
Mm-hmm.
and usually fail.
Well, I discovered a lot of obscure horror movies because of those episodes you did.
Mm-hmm.
Like those episodes, they taught me a lot about different movies that I probably would have. And that was another thing that Derrick really liked to do. Was he liked to
Mm-hmm.
to let people know about other movies, and that was one thing that he was adamant about when we did this show, and I was too. Is that we didn't want to waste time,
Mm-hmm.
tearing apart things we didn't like. Instead, we wanted to
Right.
spend our time talking about things we liked. And we even found, and in the whole run of episodes we covered 60 movies. We'd done 60 episodes
Mm-hmm.
of the show together. Zack
Right.
Snyder's Just League was supposed to be 61. But in that time, and I had mentioned this on the show, I think there were only a few movies that I could say I actively did not like, and that I couldn't find really anything good. One was Batman v Superman. Another one was
Mm-hmm.
Steel. And if you want to hear, because he had been threatening that he would choose Steel. He had been threatening.
Uh-oh.
And because we had done a poll, because when we were leading up to our 50th episode, we decided, let's do we'll let the listeners pick a movie. We'll do
Mm-hmm.
a poll, and then we'll watch it live, and we'll record our commentary for it.
Right.
And we were trying to get votes out, and Derrick said, "Now look, if you motherfuckers don't vote, then I'm going to pick Steel." And sure enough, you had some wise asses in the comments being like, "You know what? I kind of want to see you guys do Steel now." And then we had done it last year, and then we had done it this year. Is he wanted to do in February? He wanted us to spotlight Black superhero movies. So the first year we did it, right? We did like Black Panther, we did Meteor Man, we did
Mm-hmm.
A-Bar, and then this year
Mm-hmm.
we had done.
Oh my God, A-Bar.
Yeah,
Oh.
we did A-Bar. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And this year we had done we did Blade 2, we did Project Power, the Jamie Foxx, Joseph Gordon-Levitt movie.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd done another one I'm blanking on right now. But then we had also done and then he said, he's like, "All right, you know what? We're gonna do Steel." And I'm like, "Oh." And I remember when we opened that episode, I had said to him, like, I opened the episode, I just shook my head, and I said, "I'm like, I fucking hate you for making me watch this movie." But goddamn, if it wasn't one of the funniest episodes we have ever done. Like,
but that's the thing. People enjoy hearing other. It sounds horrible me saying it, but people enjoy. That's why one of the things that we used to say on Better in the Dark is we watch this shit so you don't have to.
Yeah.
So and that's something I try to keep in my partnership with Des nowadays.
Yeah.
That yes, even Derrick has said to me more than one occasion, you can be a good movie, you can be a bad movie, just don't be a boring movie.
Yeah.
And I'm one of these people that believes, and I'm sure Derrick might have agreed with me, that there should be no such thing as a guilty pleasure.
Yes, I think so too. I definitely agree. I think
that. If you like, for example, I love The Return of Captain Invincible.
Mm-hmm.
Since this is a podcast about superhero movies. The Return of Captain Invincible, which is directed by the French-born, Australian-raised Felipe Mora. And it is bug fucking insane. It is Alan Arkin plays a Superman stand. It was basically a parody of the Superman in the movie, with Alan Arkin as Superman and Christopher Lee has Lex Luthor.
Oh wow! I gotta.
And it's a musical.
Oh my god!
It is a musical with music by Richard O'Brien.
I know Derrick would have. I'm surprised. I'm actually surprised that Derrick had not picked that movie, and because
I think it's very difficult. It's very difficult to find, but the thing is, when I introduced him to it, it was a joy because yes, it is not a good movie.
Yeah.
The work of Felipe Mora is not good as a whole, but it has such this energy. It's like listening to a kid recount a story, like a 5-year-old kid recount a story in one breath. And then this happens, and then this happens, and then Christopher Lee sings a song about alcoholism, and then this happens.
Oh wow! I'm confident that if he were still around, he would have definitely gotten around to picking that at some point.
Oh! For some reason, the film I've been thinking about a lot is The Beast Must Die.
Oh no!
The werewolf movie. Oh, go ahead.
I was thinking about something else because he had written a book that was an adapted screenplay from like a B movie or something.
Right.
And it had a similar title, so I just flashed back to that real briefly, and I'm like, no.
It's like one of the obscure, because I used to joke that there were like 3 different shows that we did every year that were like our WrestleMania, our SummerSlam, and our Royal Rumble.
Right.
And one of them was the obscure horror movies episode. And one year he talked about The Beast Must Die, which is a werewolf movie in a sort of mystery framework, where Calvin Lockhart, a bunch of people he suspects are werewolves, to his home, and tries to determine which one is a werewolf so he can kill it. And towards the end of the film takes it's called a werewolf break, where you're supposed to figure out who the real werewolf is. And he had such glee describing this to me, and I had this image of the old Felix the Cat clocks, those Felix the Cat clocks where the eyes would go back and forth in time with the
yeah.
So I had this image of this werewolf head with the eyes going back and forth and back and forth. But yeah, I mean, stuff like when we came up with Little Blade.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Little Blade and little, all that stuff. But that was the joy. You didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I think that's what he would want us, those of us who had the privilege of knowing him, to continue doing, is trying to create that sort of sense of wonder for other people.
Yeah. And I think that's a good note to end on as any. Is just that idea.
Also, stay safe, everybody. Wear your masks.
Well, yeah, that was something else he had started signing off on. Was he would say, test negative, stay positive.
Yeah, well, I may use that because over in the Honeywell Experiment, the Honeywell Experiment is a podcast I do with Chris Honeywell where we talk about grindhouse movies, and there's this whole stupid backstory where I'm supposed to be this mad scientist. And I started saying, guys, wear your mask. It's nothing.
Yeah.
And Chris says that's not a very supervillainy thing to say. I say, well, if I take over the world, there's nobody to boss around. Where's the fun? So yeah, people, please stay safe. We're not asking you to do it for our benefit, but for your benefit.
Yeah. Okay.
I have. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to ask you, where can people find you online?
These days, I have, due to a bizarre set of circumstances, I have found myself as creative director of the Akadekaganagon Theater Works, a online audio drama troupe that has been doing weekly productions since about November.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find the ATW at their newly minted website, atw.ninja.
Okay.
That's probably the best place to find it. And, there are other, I'm in other places too. I'm one of the rotating co-hosts with Des Reddick on Dread Media, and I do this Honeywell Experiment once a month. So I just, you can find me. Don't worry.
And
don't worry, guys. And if you can find me, I'll find you. And
I believe Better in the Dark is still on the internet as well.
Kalen and Kelly Loge. Kelly Loge, who probably has done so much for so many podcasters and doesn't get nearly the credit he deserves, has maintained the Better in the Dark site. You can still access the episodes. And I think Kalen and I are talking about devoting a month to re-releasing the best episodes.
Okay.
So yes, you can find Better in the Dark, including the Hottie Hall of Fame, and including the glossary, all the weird shit we put on that site.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't see the website. Here it is, bitdsite.wordpress.com, and it is still on Apple Podcasts, Player
right.
FM. It's on Audible even. Podbay, yeah. So anywhere if you have not listened to those episodes, go back and re-listen to Better in the Dark. There's a ton of content on there. I mean, you guys did that. Sorry, you said for 7 years you did it?
7 years, most of it almost without fail on a bi-weekly schedule.
Right, yeah.
And the thing is, of course, it's weird being referred to by other podcasts as a first-generation podcaster. But there are other podcasts that said, yeah, we've listened to Better in the Dark. We said we could do this better than those guys. But yeah, no, and they're interesting. The thing about the internet now is that your moments in time are frozen.
Right.
Your good moments and your bad moments. And that's why you got to be careful out here.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this is a moment in time, 7 years of a friendship of two people who were like brothers to each other. Mm-hmm. God, I sound so pretentious. And keep in mind, though, that I'm sure our opinions on some of these movies changed.
Yeah.
But there you go.
Yeah,
it's an interesting time capsule, and you get to hear the episode where I fell asleep.
But yeah, there's a lot of stuff on there. Like just looking at it on Audible. Audible has a total count of 172 episodes. So that's like
yes, including I think we had 160 official episodes.
Right. Then you had like a bunch. Yeah, and you had like 0.5 episodes. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Which were little stopgaps when we were having problems with our schedule that were supposed to be a half an hour each, and we did one about the Colorado shooting back when these kind of tragedies were less ubiquitous.
Yeah.
But we would just anything like. I think one of the frankest conversations we ever had is on one of those 0.5 episodes, which is the one we talked about racism.
Yeah, we had I remember when we covered the Watchmen TV show, we done a 3-part episode on that, 3-part series on that, and we had a lot of really good conversations about that same topic and about like American history and all that kind of stuff. And, and like that was like, not only was Derrick just a fun guy to be around, someone who knew a lot about movies, but he knew a lot, period. Like he was one of the most well-educated men I've ever known. Like he knew so much about, like anytime you wanted to ask Derrick about something, like I remember I could never stump him with a movie. Like I'd bring up some movie like, oh yeah, I've seen that. And but like even like historical knowledge too, he was the same way. Like there were so many things like, I mean, because he was one of those types of people who just love to keep learning. Because I remember we did, he came on Japan on Film to do to cover the Japanese remake of Unforgiven, and one of the things, and when we were talking that episode, one of the things he mentioned on there was that because there was this whole subplot involving the Ainu, the indigenous people in Japan, in northern Japan. And there was one character, there was a whole Ainu subplot. And he said, he's like, I was so interested in this that as soon as the movie was over, I went and I looked up stuff about the Ainu.
Well, he was a firm believer of something that I like to distill into the saying, the man who claims to know everything is only admitting he knows nothing.
Yeah.
So new ideas fascinated him. Oh my, when I brought him in like 65, I think, somebody put together a paperback called For Bond Lovers Only. And in that paperback was an article by John Dulles about Soviet science cities.
Oh, yeah.
And he got fascinated with this. When he read that, he was just like totally fascinated by the idea that there were these little American cities throughout the USSR where spies were trained to learn how to be American. Yeah.
I think he may have been the one I learned that from, because I think he was the one who told me about that.
Yeah, I mean, we would find these things and we would share them and we would talk about I think people think that they stop learning once they get out of school. No, guys, no. You should always be learning.
Yeah.
So that's another thing we can do.
Yeah, try to learn as much as you can. Keep educating yourself. Keep creating. Keep watching new movies, watching obscure movies, because those are the ways. Watch
older movies.
Yeah.
I'm talking to you, you younger whippersnappers, because I know that there's a whole generation of you that don't want to watch anything before 1977. But there's a whole slew of films that, yes, they're slower than you want. They're have a different cadence, but they're amazing.
Yeah.
And the reason all you chuckleheads who talk about what a great film Joker was, obviously haven't Joker, otherwise known as my Martin Scorsese fan fiction. Let me tell you something. Go back and watch Taxi Driver. That'll learn you some. I'm sorry, that pisses me off. that movie pissed me off.
We had actually covered that movie. Derrick had that was one of Derrick's picks. We did that I think last year, I want to say. But yeah, so we did Joker. We did a whole bunch of stuff, spanning, all the way back from like Batman 66, A-Bar, and like, to even, Avengers and Age of Ultron.
I think
and
the three of us have said more about A-Bar than anybody else has.
Probably, yeah. Probably right there, yeah. All right, Tom, it's been a pleasure. It's been great talking to you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And guys, stay safe and learn things.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
As we have been saying, you can go over to superherocinephiles.com. We do have links to Derrick's website. There is a link for his fiction website, FergusonInc.com, as well as a link to his movie
The Ferguson
reviews.
Theater.
Ferguson Theater, yeah, DerrickLFerguson.com. And go through and read some of those reviews, because he wrote so many reviews, and he covered not only big movies, but old movies, obscure movies. He had he was not discriminating in what kind of movies he would watch.
That's another thing you guys can do. That's another thing you guys can do if you want to honor his memory. Go on to the Ferguson Theater. Find a movie that he reviewed that you never saw before. And I'm not talking about one of these films that you were going to get to anyway. Mm-hmm. Preferably a film made before you were born.
Yeah.
And watch it. Yeah.
He's got a ton of movie reviews on there. Also, buy his books if you haven't yet. You could.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure there are links to all of them on Ferguson Inc. If not, just type his name into Amazon. Like, you'll find his Amazon page. Tons of stuff he published through Pulpwork Press, through Pro Se, through Airship 27. Lots of content on there if you have not sampled his work. So please make sure to do that. But that does it for this special episode, where Superhero Cinephiles crosses over with Better in the Dark for a revival.
Goes back in time.
Yeah. I still haven't decided what's going to happen with the show going forward. A lot of people have said that they want to hear it continuing. So if you're one of those people who wants to see the Superhero Cinephiles go on, please let me know, drop me an email. Also, I did say that I want to put together a memorial episode with people contributing their thoughts, their memories, or whatnot about Derrick, about his life, about his work. So if you have not, I've gotten a few responses already, but if you have not done that, if you could just record a little bit of audio or a little bit of video of just yourself, 1 to 2 minutes or so, and just send it over to superherocinephiles@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening. It's going to be a unusual time at the podcast here for a little while we try to figure things out and try to give Derrick the kind of send off that he deserves and he would appreciate. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks for watching. Visit us on the web at superherocinephiles.com, and remember to subscribe to watch more of our videos.